The gardener, a gaunt figure tending grave roses, recognizes Isolde's hollow vein and offers a bargain, knowledge of the curse for a single petal. The greenhouse. The greenhouse exhaled rot. Isolde's breath caught as she pushed through the iron-framed door, her eyes adjusting to the phosphorescent gloom. Glass corridors stretched before her like the ribs of some vast, dying creature. The panes overhead were warped and cracked, filtering what little moonlight remained into a sickly greenish haze that made her skin look cadaverous. Grave roses lined every path. She'd read about them in her family archives, flowers that bloomed only in soil fed by the dead, their petals black as old blood, their thorns luminescent with a substance the texts refused to name. Here hundreds of them twisted from the earth in organized rows, as if someone had been conducting an experiment in cultivating the impossible. The gardener stood at the far end of the central chamber, his back to her. He was taller than she'd expected, though tall was a relative measure when applied to someone so gaunt he seemed to cast no shadow at all. His black coat hung from his frame like fabric draped over a skeleton, and his hands, even from a distance, looked more like claws than fingers. He was touching one of the grave roses, running his fingertips along its thorns with the tenderness of a man caressing a lover's face. "You seek knowledge, child of the hollow vein." He hadn't turned around. Isolde's pulse quickened. The curse's secrets are not freely given. His voice was thin, reedy, the sound of wind through a hollow reed. When he finally turned, his eyes found hers with an accuracy that suggested he'd known exactly where she stood from the moment she entered. Deep-set, unfathomable, they held the fixed intensity of something that didn't quite blink at the right intervals. Isolde forced herself to step forward. The floor beneath her boots was a minefield of broken glass and creeping vines. One piece crunched under her heel, loud in the suffocating quiet. "I am Isolde von Voss," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Of the hollow vein." The gardener's lips curved upward, not quite a smile. "Ah." He moved toward her, his gait jerky and unnatural, as if his joints didn't quite cooperate with his intentions. "I can see it now, the mark. The vein runs through you like it ran through—" He stopped. His eyes flicked away toward the massive glass case that dominated the chamber's center. Inside, grave roses writhed and twisted, their black petals seeming to move with an agency of their own. The case was ringed with candles whose flames didn't flicker so much as spasm, casting shadows that danced independently of any light source. Isolde's hand moved to her chest. Through whom? The gardener's breathing had changed. It came faster now, through his nose, a sound like a creature scenting blood. He extended one withered hand toward her, and in his palm lay a single petal, darker than the others, its surface glistening as though freshly plucked. "One petal," he whispered. "Touch it, and I'll tell you everything about the curse that hollows you." Isolde stared at the petal. Even from a distance she could smell it, the cloying sweetness mixed with something else, something that made her stomach turn. It smelled like earth that had held too many bodies. "What is the price?" she asked. "The petal itself, one of my roses, one of my children." His fingers trembled slightly as he held it out. "And in exchange you receive what your sister cannot find elsewhere, the truth." The greenhouse seemed to contract around them. The candlelight grew dimmer, or perhaps her pupils were dilating in response to some chemical in the air. The grave roses released a pollen that tasted bitter on her tongue. She thought of Leora, pale and fading in her chamber. She thought of the cold spreading through her own veins, the hollow vein burning like ice water through her blood. She thought of the century of brides, one after another, claimed by whatever curse had taken root in Nachtmar's soil. Isolde reached into her own cloak and withdrew a single grave rose petal she had plucked from the overgrown garden outside, one of the few that hadn't tried to draw blood when she touched it. She held it forward, and the gardener's eyes fixed on it with an intensity that made her feel like prey. "I offer you this," she said, "in exchange for your knowledge, a single petal for the key to salvation." The gardener's breath hitched. For a moment he didn't move, then his hand darted out, and his fingers closed around the petal she held. His skin was cold, so cold it burned, and his grip lingered far longer than the transaction required. "You have courage, child of the hollow vein." His voice had dropped to barely a whisper. "But be warned, the price of knowledge is often higher than it seems." He released her, and Isolde pulled her hand back, cradling it against her chest. Where it touched her, her skin felt numb. "I accept the risk," she said. "Tell me what I must do to break the curse that plagues my family." The gardener turned and walked deeper into the greenhouse, his movements maintaining that same jerky, unnatural gait. Isolde followed, her boots crunching on glass and vine. Around them the grave roses appeared to reach forward, their luminescent thorns catching the candlelight like watching eyes. He stopped before a shelf lined with jars and vials. Isolde didn't look at what they contained. "Your sister's grave," he said, selecting a small crystal vial from among the others. "At midnight you must place this petal upon the earth." He pressed something into her hand, another petal, but this one felt different, heavier. It burned against her palm like ice. "Speak the words I will give you," he continued, "and the curse will be lifted." Isolde's fingers closed around it. "What are the words?" The gardener turned to face her fully. In the sickly light his eyes looked like empty sockets. "Spiritus mortis, reveni." His voice dropped lower. "Death's spirit, return. Speak it 3 times over her grave, and the hollow vein's grip will loosen." "And then?" "And then?" He smiled, a true smile this time, and it was worse than the mockery of one. "And then you will understand what it means to be bound to something you cannot escape. You will understand what I understand, what your family has always understood." Isolde's throat tightened. She wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression told her the bargain was complete, knowledge given, price paid. She turned and walked back toward the entrance, the petal burning in her closed fist. Behind her she heard the soft whisper of his voice, barely audible over the sound of the grave roses rustling in air that shouldn't move. "At midnight, child, at midnight everything changes.